Coming up, the Nets get in on the NBA's trade frenzy leading up to the draft. I'll break down all aspects of the deal after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's show, it's a pseudo-emergency pod. Not the biggest trade in the world, but we rarely get trades in the NBA, so I'm calling it an emergency pod. I'm going to be breaking down the Nets' involvement in a 3-team trade with the Hawks and Celtics, detailing what went into it and what moves could follow. So the trade right off the bat, the Nets get Terrence Mann and the number 22 pick in tomorrow's draft. The Celtics get Georges Niang and a second, and the Hawks get Kristaps Porzingis and a second. So this is a salary dump move for the Nets. The Celtics, get off some money and dip below the second apron after they also traded Drew Holiday to the Trailblazers yesterday. And the Hawks take on Kristaps Porzingis and a second. They're obviously looking to compete there. But for the Nets, it's another salary dump. And they take on Terrence Mann, who has 3 years and $47 million left on his contract. So not a terrible deal by any means there. But the Hawks were trying to, the Celtics were trying to shed money and not take back that contract in this deal. So the Nets help them there, and they get the number 22 pick via the Hawks in return. And, instant reaction for me, this is a great deal for the Nets. A lot of people have been asking me, because there were seconds and other things involved, do the Nets, are the Nets sending anything out in this trade, or one of the seconds theirs? A league source told me that the Nets aren't sending out anything in this deal. And a lot of people say you have to send something out. So by my understanding of it, they can send out just a small amount of cash, cash considerations to make it work. But they're not sending out any players, any assets in the deal. So Sean Marks takes on Terrence Mann, 3 years, $47 million, about $15 million annually over the next 3 seasons, and gets the number 22 pick. And that now gives the Nets 5 first-round picks in this draft and 6 within the top 36. Before I get into what can be next, just want to talk about, Sean Marks and the job that he's done, because I talked obviously throughout last season about the cap space that the Nets were prioritizing having this summer. A lot of fans complained, including me. I didn't complain about it, but I had some gripes about them not getting off of Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith, guys like that earlier, because those guys did hurt their tank earlier in the year. The Nets obviously started the year off 9-10, and that put them behind the 8 ball and, kind of led to them ending up with the 6th best lottery odds. And the rationale behind that and Sean Marks waiting, everybody knew, was they were really prioritizing taking on expiring contracts, which they eventually did. They took on D'Anthony Melton in the Dennis Schroeder trade, and then D'Angelo Russell in the Dorian Finney-Smith trade. And by taking on expiring contracts, they maintained that cap space. And I talked about it on my last pod yesterday, my mailbag episode, with people asking me, why did Mark handle the tank like that? I said he was prioritizing the cap space, and we'll see if he's able to do anything with this cap space to justify that. And this was the first move. He gets the number 22 pick for free, and the Nets still have around, $35 to $37 million in cap space, I believe, after this. So there could be more salary dumps to come, but this is a really nice first one with the Nets. The Nets have been talking about, or there have been speculation about the Nets taking on Kristaps Porzingis deal, and would they get a first-round pick for that? And, that was $30 million. Obviously, it was expiring. But the Nets get a smaller deal now. It's over 3 years. So, it's Terrence Mann, 3 years, $15 million annually, I said. And they get this number 22 pick, and it really shouldn't hamper them much from a flexibility standpoint. And it gives them another asset in this coming draft tomorrow on Wednesday. And, Sean Marks has shown a history of doing this with the salary dumps. I talked about this as a possibility heading into the season or the offseason, and why I thought it was the direction that they were going to head, as opposed to, signing restricted free agents or making aggressive moves or anything along those lines. Once Giannis Antetokounmpo appeared to be off the board for now, it seemed like it was confirmed that the Nets are going to be in a rebuild, another tanking season. And what was the best utilization of this cap space if that's going to be how they're going, the direction they're going this coming season? Taking on salaries in return for more assets, adding to their stockpile of picks. That was the route. And it's something we've seen Sean Marks do during his first time rebuilding the team when he got hired in 2016. He did numerous salary dumps there. He got D'Angelo Russell alongside Timofey Mozgov. Russell turned into an all-star. He got Damari Carroll from the Toronto Raptors and brought in a first-round pick alongside him. He also got Alan Crabb in a salary dump from the Trailblazers. So this is a classic page out of the Sean Marks playbook. He does it again. He gets number 22, utilizes that cap space. And the Nets now, as I said, have 5 first-round picks tomorrow. They have 8, 19, 22, 26, 27, and then they have 36 at the top of the second round. So there's a lot of possibilities there. What could potentially be coming? I'll touch on that after a quick break. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off their first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will move them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Coming out of the break, talking about the Nets' latest trade, a salary dump in which they got Terrence Mann and the number 22 pick from the Atlanta Hawks. And that, to me, I think to everybody else, seems like a precursor to more moves to come. Because as I said before the break, Nets now have 5 first-round picks, numbers 8, 19, 22, 26, 27, and they also have 36 at the top of the second. So 6 picks within the top 36, which is pretty unbelievable. I don't know when the last time we saw something like that was, but I talked yesterday in my mailbag episode, people asking me about the Nets potentially trading up, and I just talked about how many possibilities there were with the Nets, beyond 8 having 19, 26, 27, and 36, how many possibilities that allowed them to trade up along with the cap space they had and veterans like Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton who could potentially be added into trades. And those possibilities grow even more now with the Nets having another pick at the top of the 20s. There's just so many things that they can do. There's numerous places that they can move up. And from things that I've been hearing from people around the league, the Nets have been investigating possibilities, areas that they could move up in numerous parts of the draft into, further into the top 10. I've heard that they've been checking in with teams, Philadelphia, a team that they've checked in with. I've heard some stuff today that they have been checking in with the San Antonio Spurs about the number 2 pick. And it seems unlikely, the reporting that we've got from San Antonio's end is that it's going to take a monstrous haul for them to move off that number 2 pick. But I know it's something that the Nets have been checking in on with the Spurs there. So those are all spots. You also have the smoke tying them to Ace Bailey, a guy that they might potentially have to move up with because we know Bailey's desired landing spots have been reported to be 6 with the Washington Wizards, 7 New Orleans Pelicans, 8 with the Nets, and any of those teams that they want to get him might have to trade up to jump the other. So trading up to 3 with Philadelphia could be a possibility for that. Trading up to 4 with Charlotte. So those are other spots that they could look to move up to. Is that the most likely scenario? I'm not sure. Ace Bailey, I outlined it on my episode with Lucas Kaplan, not necessarily a guy I would trade up for, but the Nets now have even more assets to do that. Outside of trading further up into the top 10, I've heard that the Nets have been interested in acquiring another lottery pick. There's several spots there that could make sense. You have 9 with the Toronto Raptors, a team that the Nets have been talking to from things I've heard. We got the rumor from Nets Daily early on about potentially the Raptors moving off 9 and RJ Barrett to give to the Nets for Cam Johnson in 19. That was a framework. Now is there something else that, could be a little different than that, but fit into that? Perhaps. You have the Phoenix Suns with number 10. They have some salaries they need to get off. They're looking for a center. The Nets have Nick Claxton. They now have 19, 22, 26, 27. Is there something there that could work out? The San Antonio Spurs also have the 14th pick. Could they be interested in a guy like Cam Johnson, a guy who could potentially bolster their wing rotation, offer some more shooting alongside Wembanyama? They have, CJ. They have more picks. That could be a spot. There's just a lot of different areas where they could look to trade up. And there are several prospects who would be late lottery prospects who the Nets could look to acquire, could look to move up to select. A couple guys I talked to today at the pre-draft media availability, Cedric Coward, a guy that the Nets worked out. He said he worked out for them in late May. He said he spoke with Jordi Fernandez and Sean Marks about the direction they were heading. Coward, a really physically imposing wing out of Washington State, a really interesting story, but he's one of the top risers throughout the pre-draft process. Some people even, putting him on big boards close to the top 10 now. So he's a really interesting player they could look to move up for. Carter Bryant, another player who they have met with and worked out. Spoke to him today. He said that he had good meetings with the Nets. He's a guy who's been really popular within NBA circles and front offices. Some places have him, not front offices, but some big boards, some mock drafts have him creeping up towards the top 10 after an encouraging freshman season out of Arizona. Both of those guys, Coward and Bryant, two guys that I'd have an eye on for the Nets if they try to trade up in the late lottery. There's obviously numerous other guys that they could look to go after there. If it's a ball handler, you got guys like Kasparas Yakachonis, Yegor Demin. Who knows? There's other guys like Derek Queen, Colin Murray-Boyles. There's just a lot of good players within this range who the Nets could potentially have interest in if they get a guy at 8 who they really like and they want to add a second high-level talent. The strength of this draft in the late lottery has been considered, really good compared to previous drafts and what you'd see in a typical year. So there are a lot of possibilities now with all these first-round picks, the remaining cap space the Nets have with Cam Johnson, with Nick Claxton, with some of these other guys. Terrence Mann, he's a guy I'm going to touch on in the last segment. Perhaps he could get flipped again. But just a lot of things, and I highly doubt. We said it was unlikely that the Nets were going to make 4 first-round picks before this happened. Now they got 5 first-round picks. So now I think it's a telltale sign that another move is coming. That move could come, as I'm posting this podcast or shortly after, who knows, but just a lot of possibilities with the Nets right now after making this move to get 22 and Terrence Mann, whose future I'm going to talk about in the final segment to close out this episode. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. Guys, are you looking to redesign your patio this summer? Maybe your style leans more towards clean and modern. You'll love being able to filter and find exactly what fits your space and budget. The delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with larger items. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, somewhat of an emergency podcast talking about the Nets' involvement in this 3-team trade with the Celtics and Hawks. The Nets picking up a first-round pick basically for free. All they have to do is take on Terrence Mann's 3-year, $47 million contract. And what could the future hold for Terrence Mann? Interesting player, a guy who is actually a Brooklyn native, was born in Brooklyn, moved to Massachusetts when he was 10 years old. After news of this deal broke, he actually tweeted that this is crazy. I was born in Brooklyn, and then shortly after deleted that tweet. So how much do you want to read into that? Could there potentially be more deals, more moves coming? Could he be flipped later? It's definitely a possibility because this trade, because the Nets took Mann into their cap space, this deal cannot be finalized until July 6th. So it could be expanded. There's going to be a lot more trades. I just outlined on the previous segment why I think there could be trades or why I think there will be trades involving the Nets potentially moving up the draft board. Could Mann be involved in that? It's definitely a possibility. And, him deleting that tweet, if you want to read into that, you can, but, it's possible that he could be on the move again. But just looking at Terrence Mann as a player and as an asset, he's a guy who, came in 2019. The Clippers picked him. I think it was 48th overall. out of Florida State in that draft. And he really carved out a role with the team over his first 5 seasons, started a bunch of games in the prior 2 seasons, and then last season was really a full-time starter for the Clippers in 2023-24. I think he started over 70 games during that season. So he's a guy who it seemed like the Clippers he had been productive. And then, he was in the rotation through the first half of last year, and the Clippers felt like they needed to shake something up, and they trade him to the Atlanta Hawks at the deadline for Bogdan Bogdanovic and 3 second-round picks. And man was productive over 30 games with the Hawks, but clearly they have, a lot of guys on the wing there. They obviously have Ricochet and some of the other players that they brought in. So I guess they didn't feel Terrence Mann was a guy that they needed to prioritize there. And they were, prioritizing more size in the front court, more shooting, and they get Porzingis to put alongside Trae Young and some of the other pieces that they have there. They're clearly trying to compete in what should be a weakened East next season. But man, I don't really think he's necessarily like a terrible contract. It's 3 years, $47 million. Do I think there's a ton of teams who would be jumping to get him at $15 million annually over the next 3 seasons? It doesn't seem like it, given the Hawks just traded his contract and also parted with a first-round pick. But, you look at his numbers over the last 3 seasons, 9 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 50, 37, 78 shooting splits, 37% from 3, albeit on low volume, but still, if he can get his confidence back, if he can jack up the volume a little bit there, he's not a player that I necessarily think has, huge negative value. I think in this deal, the Hawks clearly wanted Porzingis, and the Celtics were clearly trying to get off of one of those incoming contracts and save some money. So it seems like the Nets were, one of the limited options there for those 2 teams, and they took advantage of it. So is Mann a contract that's necessarily going to be, a complete negative and immovable? I don't think so by any of the stretch of the imagination. There's other teams who could be looking to bolster their wing corps, and, they could have some interest in a guy like him. He's, only 28 years old, going to be 29 in October. So we'll see what could come of it. He could be a guy, as I said, who is flipped. He could be flipped in the next 4 hours, leading up to the draft. He could be a guy who's involved in another deal. But if not, he's a guy who should have a role with the Nets next season. I mean, it's not like the Nets have a ton of, super experienced veteran wings, guys like that. They have Cam Johnson, obviously. If you're talking about other veterans, it's really just Nick Claxton. We'll see if they bring D'Angelo Russell or some guys back. But I have talked about, them potentially bringing in however many rookies. Now having 5 first-round picks, you'd think they bring probably definitely at least 2, probably 3 rookies, with the volume of picks they have right now. And there is going to be there's some need to have a veteran presence, guys who have played in high leverage spots before, guys who have been pros and know how to go about it. There's some value in that. We talked about Cam Johnson and the value in that. So could Terrence Mann be that guy? Potentially. And, if Cam Johnson's on the move, could Mann be a guy who comes in and mentors some of these rookies? It's definitely not out of the question. So the Nets bottom line is the Nets pick up Terrence Mann, a guy who I don't think by any point, any stretch of the imagination is like a terrible contract, a terrible player or asset. And they get a first-round pick alongside him that just opens really just so many possibilities leading up to this draft and even beyond it. There's just so many directions that the Nets can take this rebuild. And based on the volume of picks they have, I would definitely expect there'd be more moves coming leading up to the draft, which will be tomorrow, or I guess this pod, if it drops today at 8 p.m., the Nets are going to have all these picks. They're going to be making more moves. I'm going to be there at Barclays Center covering all of it. And it's going to be really interesting because Sean Marks, we know historically leading up to the draft, he likes to get things rolling. He started cooking with this deal, and I think there's a lot more to come. So we'll have a lot more coverage of that here on Locked On Nets and also on Clutch Points. But that does it for this emergency episode. Thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the show. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Be sure to like, comment. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. I've got really strong feedback on what I've been doing so far, and I'm really trying to help grow this channel. So anything you can do there is much appreciated. But I'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.